the brightest star in Vegas. The spotlight found Dean Martin as he sauntered onto the stage of the Copa Room, a casual elegance in his every step. A ripple of applause started, then roared, echoing through the plush velvet and crystal chandeliers. His tuxedo, a tailored masterpiece, seemed to melt into the shadows and then gleam under the intense lights. He winked at a woman in the front row, a smile playing on his lips, and the room seemed to collectively sigh. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen." His voice, a warm, resonant baritone, purred into the microphone. "It's a real pleasure to be here tonight." He launched into a smooth rendition of Everybody Loves Somebody, his voice effortlessly gliding over the notes. The crowd was utterly captivated, swaying with the rhythm, lost in the easy charm that was uniquely Dean. He made it look so simple, so effortless, yet every note was perfectly placed, every gesture calculated to maximize his appeal. He truly was the brightest star in Vegas, a beacon of effortless, cool, and undeniable talent. Newspaper headlines screamed his praises. Dino delivers another knockout. Martin's magic continues. King of cool reigns supreme. Fan mail arrived by the sackful, overflowing with adoration and declarations of love. Photographs showed him laughing with his beautiful wife, Jeanne. Their children gathered around them, a picture of idyllic family bliss. The world adored Dean Martin, and he, in turn, seemed to adore the world right back. Rosie the Whisper. Malone watched him from her usual spot at the bar, a quiet corner where she could observe without being observed. She'd known Dean since he was a hopeful crooner, a kid with a golden voice and a hunger for the big time. He hadn't changed, not really. Still the same smooth talker, the same genuine smile. But the stakes were higher now. Vegas had a way of chewing up and spitting out even the brightest stars if they weren't careful. Rosie, with her sharp eyes and even sharper instincts, knew the currents that ran beneath the city's glittering surface. She knew the whispers, the unspoken deals, the iron grip of certain men who saw everything as a commodity. Dean, in his blissful bubble of fame, seemed unaware of the shark circling. Later, after the final curtain call, the last encore, and the lingering applause faded, Dean found himself in his dressing room, the scent of stale cigar smoke and cheap champagne still clinging to the air. He unknotted his tie, his shoulders relaxing with a sigh of contentment. He poured himself a small measure of amber liquid, swirling it gently in the glass. The roar of the crowd still hummed in his ears, a sweet symphony of success. He glanced at a framed photo of Jeanne and the kids, their smiles wide and genuine. He had everything he'd ever dreamed of: a loving family, a career that soared, and the adoration of millions. Life was good, truly good. He took a sip, the warmth spreading through him. He was on top of the world, and for now, nothing could touch him. A visit from Mr. Big. The applause still echoed faintly in Dean's ears as he peeled off his tuxedo jacket, the silk lining cool against his skin. The dressing room, usually a sanctuary of quiet after a performance, felt particularly still tonight. He unknotted his tie, tossing it onto the velvet chaise, and loosened the top buttons of his shirt. A tumbler of amber liquid sat waiting on the small table, ice clinking softly as he picked it up. The first sip was always the best, a smooth burn that eased the tightness in his shoulders. He leaned back, exhaling slowly, the day's energy draining away. A sudden sharp rap on the door broke the calm. Dean frowned. No one usually bothered him right after a show. Before he could respond, the door swung inward with a low thud, revealing two hulking figures in dark suits. They stood silently, blocking the light from the hallway, their eyes scanning the room with an unnerving intensity. Then a third man stepped between them, his presence immediately commanding the space. Silas Blackwood, known in hushed whispers as Mr. Big, was a vision of understated menace. His suit, tailored to perfection, seemed to absorb the light. His silver hair was slicked back, revealing a sharp, intelligent face marked by eyes that held the cold, unwavering glint of polished steel. A faint, almost imperceptible smile played on his lips, a smile that promised more than it delivered. "Mr. Martin," Blackwood's voice was a low rumble, surprisingly smooth, like gravel smoothed by a relentless river. "A pleasure, as always." He gestured vaguely at one of the bodyguards, who wordlessly pulled a chair from the corner and positioned it in front of Dean. Blackwood settled into it with an air of absolute authority, his gaze never leaving Dean's. The bodyguards remained by the door, statuesque and silent. Dean set his glass down, the clink sounding disproportionately loud in the sudden quiet. "Mr. Blackwood," he replied, his own tone even, betraying none of the sudden prickle of unease that had snaked its way up his spine. "To what do I owe this? Unexpected visit?" Blackwood chuckled, a dry, humourless sound. "Always straight to the point, Dean. I admire that. I've come to offer you an opportunity, a partnership, if you will." He leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing. "There's a venture I'm putting together, something lucrative. Millions, Dean. For us, for you, your family. A future without a single worry." He paused, letting the words hang in the air, thick with unspoken implications. "All you have to do is say yes." The unheard no. The smoke from Mr. Big's imported cohiba drifted lazily upwards, catching the ambient light of the private suite. He leaned back, a predatory calm settling on his features. "So, Dean," he began, his voice a low purr, "we're talking about a partnership, a new venture. It's a gold mine, truly, and with your name attached, well, it's unstoppable." He named a figure that made the air in the room feel thick with its impossible weight, then watched Dean expectantly, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on his lips. Dean, however, didn't flinch. He met Mr. Big's gaze with a steady, unyielding resolve. "Mr. Blackwood," he said, his voice quiet but firm, "I appreciate the offer. Truly. But I can't be a part of anything like that. My principles, they just won't allow it. My work is on the stage, entertaining people. That's where my focus has always been, and that's where it'll stay." A beat of absolute silence followed Dean's words, heavy and stretched. Mr. Gissé and Big's smirk vanished, replaced by a flicker of genuine bewilderment. He leaned forward slowly, stubbing out the half-smoked cigar in a crystal ashtray with a deliberate, almost theatrical motion. His eyes, previously a murky brown, seemed to darken, becoming pools of obsidian. "Principles?" he repeated, the word sounding alien, almost foreign on his tongue. "In this town, Dean, principles are a luxury few can afford, and fewer still choose to." The room seemed to grow colder. Dean felt the shift in Mr. Big's demeanour, a subtle but profound change from the charming, persuasive businessman to something far more dangerous. The mobster's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching almost imperceptibly at his temple. His initial shock was giving way to a slow, simmering anger. Dean had witnessed plenty of temper tantrums in his life, but this was different. This wasn't a flare-up, it was a deep, fundamental offence to an ego that had never truly known refusal. "You understand what you're saying no to, don't you, Dean?" Mr. Big's voice had dropped, now a low growl that vibrated with suppressed menace. He rose from his chair, his movements fluid and unhurried, yet radiating a palpable sense of coiled power. He walked to the suite's expansive window, looking out over the glittering tapestry of the Strip. "Vegas is a strange place," he mused, his back to Dean. "It gives with one hand and takes with the other, and it's rarely kind to those who refuse its gifts, especially when those gifts come from me." He turned, his eyes locking onto Dean's once more. The veiled threat hung in the air, thick and undeniable. "Think about that, Dean. Because sometimes a no isn't just a word, sometimes it's an invitation to a different kind of game. And in that game, the stakes are much, much higher than any $1,000,000 deal." With a final chilling glance that promised unseen consequences, Mr. Big turned and walked out, leaving the oppressive Abstimmungsball and the faint scent of expensive cigar smoke to linger in the room. Whispers and warnings. The phone call came in the middle of a rehearsal, the kind of call that sliced through the usual buzz of the orchestra pit. Dean's manager, a man whose usual demeanour was unflappable, looked distinctly flustered. He ushered Dean into a quiet, corner backstage, the scent of dust and old velvet thick in the air. "Dean, listen," his manager began, his voice barely a whisper. "The Sands, they've cancelled your Tuesday and Wednesday night shows, no reason given, just cancelled." He ran a hand through his already dishevelled hair. "Then the Riviera called. Same thing, pushed your residency back 3 weeks, scheduling conflicts, but they said, it's all very sudden, very odd." Dean felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. This wasn't just odd, it was unprecedented. His shows rarely, if ever, cancelled. Vegas ran on his name. He tried to project an air of calm, but inside a quiet alarm was sounding. Meanwhile, across town at Rosie's diner, the air was thick with the aroma of strong coffee and hushed conversations. Rosie, wiping down her polished counter, missed nothing. She noticed the black Cadillac with tinted windows idling outside the Sands for longer than usual, the same one she'd seen parked near Dean's usual haunts. She caught fragments of whispers from the wise guys who frequented her establishment, their voices dropping to conspiratorial murmurs whenever Dean's name came up. "Trouble brewing," one muttered over his eggs. "Big man ain't happy." Rosie's sharp eyes met his in the reflection of the stainless steel, and he quickly looked away. Later that evening, Dean found himself perched on a stool at Rosie's, the clatter of plates and distant jukebox music a familiar comfort. He nursed a bourbon, the ice clinking softly against the glass. "Rosie," he began, his voice low. "Something's not right. My shows, they're dropping like flies. No explanations, just polite brush-offs." He looked at her, searching for something in her perceptive eyes. "It feels orchestrated." Rosie leaned against the counter, her arms crossed, a dish towel slung over her shoulder. Her expression was thoughtful, a blend of concern and knowing. "Orchestrated, you say?" she mused, her gaze drifting to the street outside. "Funny, Dean. I've been hearing a few notes myself. Certain folks, not usually so subtle, making their presence felt. A lot of talk about disrespect and lessons learned. And that black Cadillac? Been following you like a shadow, hasn't it?" Dean's jaw tightened. He hadn't mentioned the car, but Rosie knew, she always knew. The whispers he'd ignored, the feeling of eyes on him, suddenly coalesced into a chilling certainty. Mr. Big wasn't just unhappy. He was sending a message, loud and clear, through the very fabric of Dean's career. The game had begun, escalating pressure. The crisp morning air usually invigorated Dean, but today a leaden weight settled in his stomach. He'd stepped out to retrieve the newspaper, a ritual he enjoyed, only to find an unexpected addition tucked beneath the doormat. It wasn't a flyer, nor a bill. It was a stark white envelope sealed with a blob of crimson wax, impressed with a crude, jagged symbol. Inside, a single, typewritten sentence read, "Some games are best played with a full house." No signature, no return address, just the chilling implication of his family's involvement. A cold tendril of fear snaked around his heart, tighter than any he'd felt before. He was still turning the note over in his mind when the phone rang that afternoon. The caller ID showed unknown number, and a prickle of unease ran down Dean's spine. He answered, a knot forming in his throat. "Dean Martin?" a gravelly voice rasped, devoid of any discernible accent. "A wise man knows when to protect his loved ones. Your wife, your kids, they're lovely. It would be a shame if anything disrupted their routine." The line clicked dead, leaving a deafening silence. The casual menace in the voice, the intimate knowledge of his family, hit Dean with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't about a show or a contract. This was real. Later that evening, the neon glow of the strip felt less like a beacon of possibility and more like a snare. Dean found Rosie at her usual corner booth in the Flamingo, nursing a club soda. The jazz trio played a sultry tune, but its melody did little to soothe Dean's frayed nerves. He slid into the booth opposite her, the exhaustion etched on his face immediately catching her keen eye. "Rough day at the office, Dino?" Rosie's voice was warm, a steadying presence in his turbulent world. She reached across the table, her hand briefly covering his. Dean took a deep breath, the metallic taste of fear still lingering. "They've changed the rules, Rosie. They're coming for my family now." He recounted the note, the phone call, the icy dread that had taken root within him. His voice was laced with the vulnerability Rosie rarely witnessed. Her expression hardened, the warmth in her eyes replaced by a dangerous glint. "That crosses a line, Dean. A big one." She leaned forward, her gaze unwavering. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know," Dean admitted, running a hand through his hair. "Part of me wants to grab them, put them on a plane, and tell them to never look back, but another part, the part that won't be intimidated, says I can't let these bastards win. Not like this, not by threatening my family." He looked at her, his jaw set. "I'm not giving in, Rosie. Not now, not ever." A calculated stand. The amber glow of whiskey in his glass swirled, a liquid echo of the tempest brewing within Dean's mind. Outside his penthouse suite, the city's nocturnal hum, a distant symphony of slot machines and laughter, felt utterly alien to the quiet storm he contained. He sank into his armchair, the leather's soft protest a confession he hadn't voiced. Going toe-to-toe with Mr. Big was unthinkable. It wasn't his game, nor a battle winnable with brute force or bravado. This was a different kind of war, waged in shadows and hushed tones, and Dean knew his only weapon, his intellect. A dangerous glint, rarely seen, flickered in his eyes as a slow smile touched his lips. He reached for a cheap notepad, a stark contrast to the room's opulence, and scrawled a single word: allies. Beneath it, names began to unfurl, each a vital thread in the intricate tapestry of power and influence that defined his Las Vegas. Not merely the obvious titans, the high rollers, the club owners, but the quiet forces, those who saw beyond the neon and understood the city's true pulse. Detective Hank Miller, a man whose integrity was as unyielding as his silence, was the first. Then Rosie Malone, a woman with a radar for pretense, whose loyalty once earned was a steel trap. He paused, his pen tapping, the strategy solidifying. Not muscle, but leverage, exposing the rot without staining his own hands. Later that evening, the air in the Sands back booth was thick with the cigarette smoke and the low thrum of a jazz trio, Rosie the Whisper. Malone slid in opposite Dean, her quick, knowing eyes assessing him in a single glance. Words weren't needed for her to grasp the tension coiled beneath his easy charm. "You look like you're brewing something, Dino," she murmured, her voice a low purr cutting through the club's din. She sipped her martini, her gaze unwavering. Dean chuckled, a sound that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Just observing, Rosie, how this town truly operates, how things get accomplished, even when the odds seem insurmountable." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper, his expression serious. "There are many good people in this city, Rosie. People who believe in fairness, in doing things the right way. And sometimes, those people wield more influence than anyone realizes." Rosie's brow furrowed, a flicker of understanding dawning. "You're not talking about a brawl, are you?" Dean shook his head slowly. "No, I'm talking about a stand, a calculated one. Sometimes, Rosie, the loudest statement isn't made with a shout, but with a well-placed whisper." He raised his glass, clinking it gently against hers. "To the quiet forces, my friend. To the ones who truly run this town." Rosie met his gaze, a slow smile spreading. "Now that," she said, her voice laced with amusement and a hint of steel, "sounds like a plan I can stand behind." The subtle leverage. The clink of ice in Dean's glass was the loudest sound in his den. He held the receiver loosely, the dial tone a faint hum. His first call was to a senator, a golf buddy from years past. "Senator, old friend." Dean's voice was smooth, casual. "I need a favour, nothing illegal, just information dissemination." He paused, listening. "Yes, exactly. A little whisper campaign about an entertainer facing unexplained difficulties in Vegas. Keep it vague, but make sure it connects to certain powerful figures. You understand?" He winked at the empty room, a phantom cigarette smoke curling from his lips. The senator's agreement was swift, laced with a familiar deference. Next was a studio executive, a man who owed Dean more than a few profitable pictures. Dean explained the concept of a soft rumour, a narrative of vulnerability that, if amplified, could become a significant pair headache for those responsible. "Just a few well-placed remarks, Jimmy, to the right ears, about a beloved entertainer and regrettable pressures." Dean leaned back, a flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. Across town, Detective Honest Hank Miller sat hunched over a stack of financial ledgers. The air in his small office was thick with the scent of stale coffee and ink. He was deep into Mr. Big's labyrinthine enterprises, a spider web of shell corporations and legitimate fronts. Hank chewed on the end of a pen, his brow furrowed. Lately, an unusual undercurrent had begun to ripple through the city. Casual remarks overheard at the precinct, snippets from anonymous tipsters, even a few hushed conversations among reporters at the local diner, all pointing to an unspoken unease about entertainers in Vegas. Not just the usual gossip, but a more pointed insinuation that something was amiss with the men and women who brought millions to the city. He marked a page in a ledger with a grimace. The public mood was shifting subtly, like a change in the desert wind. He recognized the pattern, the slow burn of public opinion being stoked. Someone was fanning the embers. A few days later, one of Dean's carefully cultivated connections, a former press agent now running a high-end PR firm, met with a seasoned journalist at a discreet downtown bistro. The journalist, known for her integrity, listened intently as the PR man detailed vague allusions to unexplained troubles befalling some of Vegas's most cherished stars. He painted a picture of beloved figures facing quiet, unspoken pressures, hints of career obstacles and veiled threats. "It's about protecting our talent, you see," the PR man murmured, stirring his coffee. "Keeping the spotlight on anything that might disrupt the magic of Vegas. The public loves these people. They deserve to know if their idols are struggling." He left just enough breadcrumbs to lead the journalist to her own conclusions. Without ever naming names, the seed was planted. The subtle leverage was at work. Mr. Bear Biggs' retreat. The scent of stale cigar smoke clung to the plush velvet drapes in Silas Blackwood's private office, a familiar comfort that now felt cloying. His eyes, usually sharp and assessing, scanned the latest reports on his mahogany desk. They weren't the usual financial statements or enforcement updates. These were clippings, hushed whispers from the city's underbelly, and coded messages from his street lieutenants. The persistent buzz around Dean Martin, amplified by the singer's unexpected resilience, was reaching an unwelcome crescendo. "The whispers are getting louder, boss," Frankie the Fixer Santoro said, his voice a low rumble. He stood opposite Blackwood, a nervous habit of smoothing his already slicked back hair betraying his unease. "Not just the usual gossip. People are starting to ask why a nobody like Dean Martin is suddenly getting so much attention." Blackwood's knuckles whitened as he gripped a crystal paperweight. "Nobody?" he scoffed, the word a poison on his tongue. "He's made himself into something, hasn't he? A persistent nuisance. Tony the Calculator Giordano, a man whose glasses perpetually slipped down his nose, cleared his throat. More than that, Silas. Detective Miller has been asking around. Not directly, mind you, subtly. But he's sniffing, asking about unusual activity, about certain pressures being applied to local talents." Silas Slick Blackwood's jaw tightened. Miller. Honest Hank. The one cop in Vegas who seemed immune to persuasion, whether by cash or intimidation. He'd been a thorn in Silas's side for years, never quite enough to truly threaten him, but always present, a constant irritating shadow. "And the press," Frankie continued, emboldened by Tony's revelation. "Nothing overt, not yet, but there are murmurs. Journalists asking questions about unseen hands in the entertainment industry. It's all very vague. But it's too close to home." Blackwood rose, pacing the thick Persian rug. Each step was deliberate, but the tension radiating from him was palpable. Dean Martin, a mere singer, was generating too much heat. The cost of continuing to pursue him, of silencing this inconvenient defiance, was beginning to outweigh the satisfaction of making an example. His reputation was built on an untouchable image, not on prolonged, messy skirmishes with a stubborn crooner. This wasn't a game he could afford to lose publicly. He stopped, turning to face his men, his eyes glinting with a cold, hard pragmatism that always trumped his pride in the end. "Call it off," he commanded, his voice devoid of its usual arrogance, replaced by a cutting edge of frustration. "All of it. The accidents, the cancelled bookings, the persuasion, everything. He's too hot to handle right now. Let him sing his songs, let Miller chase ghosts. There are bigger fish to fry." Frankie and Tony exchanged a quick, relieved glance. The order, though delivered with a palpable reluctance, was clear. Silas Blackwood, Mr. Big, had retreated. For now, principles prevail. The oppressive quiet that had settled over the Copa room in recent weeks dissolved, replaced by a vibrant hum. Tables were once again full, not with nervous whispers, but with boisterous laughter and the clinking of glasses. Dean's name blazed on the marquee, no longer shadowed by implied threats. The subtle chill in the air, a presence felt more than seen, had lifted. His band, previously stiff with apprehension, now played with an easy swing, their smiles genuine. Even the stagehands moved with a lighter step, their banter returning to its usual playful rhythm. Frank and Sammy, who had kept their distance during the worst of it, were now conspicuously present, their open support a powerful endorsement to anyone still watching. After a particularly raucous set, Dean found Rosie waiting for him backstage, leaning against a stack of empty liquor crates. The scent of stale cigarette smoke and cheap perfume clung to the air, but Rosie, as always, carried the clean scent of jasmine and something vaguely metallic, like freshly sharpened steel. "That was a good one, Dino," she said, pushing off the crates. Her gaze was unusually soft, devoid of its usual sharp assessment. Dean leaned against the cool concrete wall, running a hand through his hair. "Felt good to sing without looking over my shoulder, Rosie." She nodded, her expression growing serious. "He's gone, Dino, back to New York. The word is, he got a strong suggestion to lay low. Vegas ain't big enough for two kings, and he wasn't the one wearing the crown." Dean chuckled, a low rumble in his chest. "Funny how that works. All that bluster, all those threats, and in the end, it was just noise." "Noise that could have cost you everything," Rosie countered, her eyes narrowing. "Don't forget that, Dean. You walked a tightrope and you didn't blink. Most men would have crumpled." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "What you did, standing up to him like that, it wasn't just about money. It was about principle. And in this town, principles usually get you buried." She offered a rare, genuine smile. "But you just proved they can get you a bigger spotlight." He met her gaze, a profound understanding passing between them. "Couldn't do it any other way, Rosie. Some lines you just don't cross, and some people you just don't mess with," she finished, a glint returning to her eyes. "Even when they sing sappy love songs." Dean laughed, the sound echoing through the narrow corridor. He felt a profound sense of relief, a lightness he hadn't realized he'd lost. Later that night, bathed in the warmth of the stage lights, Dean held the microphone, its cool metal a familiar comfort in his hand. He launched into "Everybody Loves Somebody Sometime," his voice richer, more resonant than ever. Each note was a declaration, a testament to enduring spirit. He wasn't just singing, he was celebrating the safety of his family, the unwavering loyalty of his friends, and the quiet triumph of his own stubborn integrity. The crowd swayed with him, lost in the melody, unaware of the silent battle he'd won. He was Dean Martin, king of cool, and in Vegas, his principles had indeed prevailed.